Our course presenter this afternoon is Barbara Lee VanHorssen. She is the founder and experimenter or executive director of the Momentum Center. She's an ordained interfaith minister, author, and speaker. She holds an MBA in leadership studies. Ms. VanHorssen has been working with and for marginalized and disenfranchised people, especially those who struggle with mental illness and intellectual and developmental disabilities for most of her life. So please join me in welcoming Barbara Lee VanHorssen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just honored to be in this group with people associated with HASP. So thank you for welcoming me. I am Barbara Lee VanHorssen from the Momentum Center, and I like to begin by introducing you to my son, Alex. Alex is 29 years old now, but when he was a junior in high school, he had his first break from reality. When he was a senior, he had his second break. And then that summer, we spent 5.5 months in and out of the hospital and residential care until we finally found the right medication to treat his schizophrenia and stabilize his life. Now, by the time that happened, he'd lost all of his friendships, all of his social connections. We know that the most important thing for gaining, retaining, regaining our health is human connection. So if you're somebody like my son, how do you even begin to do that? Our story is very personal, but it's not unique. In fact, 1 in 4 people will struggle with a substantial, significant mental illness at some point in their lifetime, which means 3 out of 4 of us have a loved one who will struggle with a significant mental illness during their lifetime. In Ottawa County, 1 out of 5 adults currently report that they are in poor mental health. Our teenagers are in crisis. 15% of our youth have thoughts about suicide. That means that in a classroom of 30 students, 5 of those students have thought about suicide seriously, and 2 or 3 have made an attempt. The good news is that 70 to 90% of people with a mental illness get better with some kind of intervention. The bad news is that 60% never seek any treatment at all. And the biggest reason for that is stigma. In fact, 58% of people who have a mental illness say the stigma is more difficult to deal with than the mental illness itself, which is where the Momentum Center comes in. We are creating a community where every person is fully visible and connected. This is our new location in Grand Haven. We also have a location in Holland, and we provide social and recreational programs for people with mental illness, addictions, and disabilities. It only costs $1 a year to be a member at the Momentum Center, and then you can participate in everything we do. You don't need a clinical diagnosis, and you don't need a referral. Everybody falls into one of those categories at some time or another. So anybody can become a member. Many times, even though what we need most is community, people who are marginalized and stigmatized have the greatest barriers in finding community. So we've created a welcoming place that removes those barriers. We have a teen program that starts at 11 and goes to 17 or 18 if you're still in high school, 18 and up for the adult program. We really are a complement to therapeutic and clinical services. So we are not doing therapy. We're really clear about that. On the other hand, we are training ordinary people in basic mental health wellness. So we can intervene with people at a time when we just don't have enough clinical resources around. There just aren't enough psychiatrists. There aren't enough clinicians to treat the population that's struggling. And so we fill the gap between the individual and clinical care. We're meeting the needs of a behavioral health script. So we have a lot of therapists who refer people to us where they can get exercise, yoga, meditation, good nutrition, cooking classes, shopping classes, financial management. They can participate in arts and crafts, bingo. social with other people. And then we refer people for clinical care. So we have active relationships with Pine Rest, with Mosaic, with a number of independent clinicians, with community mental health therapy throughout the community. Did I hit the wrong button? There we go. We also have outings. So we have a van, and then we also have a bus. The bus will hold 2 wheelchairs or 15 people total. And we go on outings. So at least once a week, we go someplace local. That could be grocery shopping. It could be to a park. It could be miniature golf, the beach, you name it, we'll go there. And at least once a month, we go further away. We go to Meyer Gardens or the zoo or the orchard. We go to a sporting event, something that people don't normally have a lot of access to. And the reason for that is twofold. One is gets people out into the community. The other is that the people as part of the community. Again, it's about social integration. There are a number of models that are about bringing services into a place and kind of protecting them. And that's a wonderful model for people who need that kind of enclosed space. We're the opposite of that. We're about integrating people into the larger community. We also have, as part of that social integration, forward-facing public venues. So in Holland, we have the Momentum Ice Cream Parlor. In Grand Haven, we have the VU Cafe. Those are open, so they bring people in so that we, again, have an opportunity to address the stereotypes and reduce the stigma. The VU Cafe opened in Grand Haven at the end of July. And if you have the next time you're in Grand Haven, you need to stop by. We're open from 7 to 2, Tuesday through Saturday. And it's a combination of the regular comfort food you might think of, along with these amazing Cajun seafood specialties. And we do that in partnership with the Us Cafe in Muskegon, which at Muskegon Heights, they have a nonprofit called Overcoming Barriers. So they're used to working with our population. We have a number of members who've been employed and others who are volunteering at the VU. And it's just a fabulous experience and wonderful food. So I encourage you to stop by the next time you're in town. We also have affinity groups. We recognize that when we create a place where everybody is welcome, that there are people that'll show up and look around and say, well, I don't necessarily see my peer group. Our members participate in all different levels. So we have people who will treat the Momentum Center like a support group. When things are going poorly, they're there. And then when things get better, they leave. And when they go south again, we see them return. And so there's an ebb and flow. We have others who are there every day. We are their community. They have no idea what's on the calendar. They show up, what's going on. And a lot of those people do have developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities. And so I have, for instance, my son who has schizophrenia, who has a very, very comfortable time in the community. I also had a son who was struggling with depression and anxiety and didn't see himself in that community. So the affinity groups are about building groups around specific identities or interest groups so that we can reach more people and again, overcome those stigmas. So that combination, I kind of liken it to a church. On Sunday morning, everybody's there. And then there's also the altar guild and the choir group. It's similar to that, the place where everyone gathers, and then these specialty groups where people can form deep relationships. We also offer a variety of support groups at both locations, a mental illness recovery group, survivors of loss due to addiction, smart recovery, family support group, and we also do Narcan training with the RED project. I mentioned our school program. Before COVID, we had a lot of people, a lot of youth coming to the center and a lot of activities on site. Since COVID, we've had a harder time getting youth to the site. So we've been doing more and more outreach at the schools. So we bring our programming to Holland High School, Central High School, Spring Lake Alternative High School, Lakeshore Middle School, and are working on building more of the relation. We can bring programming there that's all about how to handle stress, how to have healthy relationships, boundaries, things that are meant to prevent substance abuse and other unhealthy reactions to the many stresses that our young people are enduring right now. And I know we're I'm sure very aware in this room of the concerns around school shootings, shooting drills, social media, and the impact that our constant cell phones are having on our youth. Having those opportunities to work with young people one-on-one to find ways to reduce stress and normalize one-on-one personal communication is really important. This is the infographic that kind of defines, explains our work. Because there are a number of different aspects, and I'll talk about more of these. In the blue box, the things that I've been talking about, where we're serving people. And if you've been following the news in our community, this is where we use funds that we get from the mental health millage that was passed 8 years ago. Other than illness, addictions, and disabilities, what we receive from the millage is not enough to cover all of that. So we also do traditional fundraising. We have corporate sponsors and individual donors, and we're always need to grow our funding stream. But no millage money goes to anything other than those services. We also address the social determinants of mental health. We believe that if we're not talking about and dealing with the systems within which people operate, that we're not dealing with whole human beings. So we deal with the social determinants of mental health through community conversations and cultural immersion experiences. We believe that by viewing all of those pieces together, then we really can look at the greater impact of our society on mental well-being and work to reduce risk factors so that people can really heal and thrive. So this talks a little bit more about those risk factors and the need, our belief, our passion that you can't speak something into existence, that you have to live it into existence, but that's not going to happen until you start giving it voice and speaking about it. So we've always been explicit about our support for populations that are marginalized and intentional about our desire to address the root causes of disparity. So we started with community conversations even before we opened the Momentum Center, talking about human rights, social justice, marginalized populations. We explore these in order to create a healthier community. And we don't shy away from controversial topics. We never have. We think the things that we say we shouldn't talk about are exactly what we need to be talking about. And we need to do that in a safe environment where we don't have to agree with each other, that we voice our experience. We will the experience. The idea isn't that we all leave in lockstep. It's that we have a better understanding of different points of view. And in that process, hopefully, we also understand our point of view better. Our most recent community conversation was held at the American Dunes Golf Club, and we talked about values across the political spectrum. And we were very intentional about inviting speakers and members in the audience who identified as Democrat, Republican, Independent, so that we could talk about what brings us together, the fact that we all live in the same community, we drive on the same roads, and if we're going to address creating health for the community, we have to find ways to walk together in doing that. These conversations are not members can participate, but there's nothing required. No member ever needs to participate in the community conversation. What we have found is a number of members who really enjoy this opportunity, and members who've said it's the first time they actually felt like they were part of the community, because they're engaging in the conversations that matter, that really affect their lives. So that integration into the social fabric of our society is one of the really unique aspects of the Momentum Center, and why we also have members now who, when they first came in, wouldn't speak to anybody and now have employment outside of our organization in the community, who've created other friendships, who are engaged in church activities and other places throughout the community that they just weren't before. We're increasing confidence, skills, and it's making a real impact in people's lives. And then the other, oh, no, let me back up, because I didn't mention, we also have free dinner and movie night. That's free to anybody in the community. So we grill hot dogs and hamburgers. People are welcome to bring something to contribute if they want to, but there's no requirement. Free dinner for anyone who shows up, and then we show a movie. Movies usually related to whatever our topic was during that month. Our only kind of rules are we won't show an R-rated movie, and we won't show a movie that's over 2 hours, because it's too long. And then the final aspect is cultural immersion. Cultural immersion is also something we do around social determinants. We believe that when you experience another culture, it gives you an opportunity to see the lens through which you see the world. And when you see the lens itself, that's when things really change. So we do this in a variety of ways. We're working to create really a social enterprise here. We want to create a larger income stream to help support the work that we're doing. So we have international cultural immersion. And people pay to go on these trips. I work with partners in the countries that we visit so that it's genuine cultural immersion. They're not mission trips. They're really reverse mission trips. We go to see what we have to learn from other cultures. And they're not vacations. I mean, people stay comfortably, but we're not going to the Hyatt for 5-star American service. Like, that's not the point. I have partners, and we go to China, Tibet, Kenya, Honduras, Egypt, and Morocco. Right now, we're planning a trip in August 2025 back to China to visit with the Uyghur community. The Uyghur community is a minority culture in China. In our news, we hear about discrimination and attempts to reduce the Uyghur population. I'm really interested in going to China because much of what we hear isn't what I experience when we're there. So I'm very much looking forward to spending time with the Uyghur community and learning about their experience and how they would report their welcome or lack thereof in the world that they live. And this is part of the Silk Road tour. So really excited about that. One of the things that's been funnest is when I work with guides, I'll often ask for experiences to places they haven't been before. And so it's really exciting to see how excited they get about visiting these places. We also do a civil rights road trip. So we charter a bus in the spring, and we bring people down to Selma, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Memphis. Again, people pay for this experience. It's an intensive, we only take 4 days for this. So it's very, very packed in. But I'd rather have people come back and complain that we did too much than not go because the trip is too long. So I tell people ahead of time, I know what the biggest complaint's going to be. We've done 3 civil rights road trips, and we'll have another one during spring break in 2025. And they really are life-changing experiences, both for those who are already familiar with kind of the racialized past of our country and those who just haven't been paying attention. We've had the whole spectrum. And we're really pushing the spring break ideas because there's a number of students and teachers who have been interested in going. And it's wonderful when we have young people along on the trip as well. So excited about that. And then one of the things that developed out of these trips was across the bridge. I was actually in Egypt thinking about the idea of, the whole idea of helping people see the world, the lens through which they see the world. And I thought, you don't need to go around the world for that to happen. You just need to spend time with people whose life experience is different than yours. And for those of us, at least in the Tri-Cities, that's as close as across the bridge in Muskegon, where people on both sides of that bridge talk about not being willing to cross it. And so started working with Muskegon Community College, and we put together an exchange, a leadership exchange between those communities. We spend a weekend, 3 days, 2 nights in one of the communities, and then a weekend in the other community. We come together before and we come together after. This will be the 3rd year of that. And we start tomorrow morning. I have to be 8 o'clock in the morning, ready to host our Muskegon guests in Spring Lake and Grand Haven. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be in Muskegon. Again, to have those conversations with people who live so close, but whose life experience is so different is sometimes heartbreaking and sometimes joyful. It's a real combination. We also have a couple of signature fundraising events. We've been doing Prom with the Purpose in Grand Haven for several years. And it is our signature fundraising event, but it's also a big part of our mission. It's about bringing, again, people together who don't normally spend time together. So we make the tickets affordable. We price things, so we're just covering our cost. Our prom this year was $40 a ticket. No, I'm sorry, $35 a ticket. And we had to raise it from 25 because we were losing money. And when you lose money on every ticket, it's not a good fundraising strategy. So we increased it to 35 this year. But it's a night of dinner and dance, and we bring together people who will spend $1,000 on an auction item, and with people who could never have dreamt of saving up $35 to buy their own ticket. We make sure that any of our members who want to go are able to go, and it's the most incredible evening, just joyful. Our members talk about it months in advance and months afterward. And so now, coming right up around the corner, we're going to try Homecoming with a Heart, a complement to the prom. Homecoming with a Heart will be in Holland. So it's coming up at September 20th, like a week from tomorrow. We'll be at the Midtown Center. And again, there'll be food and dance, and tickets are for sale. It's going to be $4 because Holland is more expensive than Grand Haven. That was a rough learning curve. We're very excited about the night. And I would encourage you, if you don't have anything else going on Friday night, a great date opportunity. Seriously, $40 for dinner and dancing and just the time of your life. So those tickets are available. But the reason we do all of this is obviously to make an impact, not just so we can talk about the things we do. So what kind of difference are we making? It turns out it's pretty significant. We are normalizing conversations around mental illness and mental health. We're giving people hope and purpose and meaning, and we are literally saving lives. There's a note here from one of our members who talked about coming in and finding people who cared whether her choice was life or death. In Holland, we've had a particularly the folks that have been showing up in Holland have had a high acuity of need. There have been several people that we've had to bring directly to the hospital who were actively suicidal. The mental health crisis is real. It's very real. And so our services are needed more than ever. There's a quote here. It's a place where I can go to be myself and not have anyone judge me. And how sad that's not just a common occurrence, that you have to find a special place where you can be yourself. We collect data. When we first opened the Momentum Center, we knew we weren't following anybody else's blueprint, and we knew if it worked, we'd want to share it. And if we were going to share it, we would need to have data and not just our feel-good stories. So we started working with a PhD candidate at the time. Now there's a PhD data scientist who works with us, but we put in data collection tools at the very beginning. We asked people to update their information every 6 months. And so we know that we're having a statistically significant impact on depression, anxiety, loneliness, social connectedness, and feelings of stigma. We also know that it's a good investment. We conducted research that was funded through the Grand Haven Area Community Center. And we demonstrated that for every dollar we receive from that millage that I mentioned, we're creating a $4 return on investment. People are getting better while needing less costly interventions. So it's really about preventative and lower cost intervention that keeps people healthier. We also, I'm super excited because yesterday, previous to yesterday, we had submitted that research to a peer-reviewed journal, and it was published yesterday. So our research has been published in a peer-reviewed journal, the Global Journal of Community Psychology Practice, and that's very exciting. I have a great research team that includes Travis from Ben Atlas, also Dr. Gloria Lee from Michigan State University, and Joe Pierce, who works for the county, and just an amazing group of people. And there's more research underway, so more findings to come. We also showed when we were doing this research that we were a change agent in the social movement against stigma in our community, influencing 20% of the area's population. And we just want to keep growing that percentage. The research projects that we're working on right now with Michigan State University is called Sierra. We're testing an intervention in emotional regulation with people who have mental illness. It's a tool that they've used successfully with people on the autism spectrum scale. And now we're modifying it for mental illness, and that study is going very well. But that's enough of me tooting our own horn. I want you to hear from members.
I had just come out of the hospital. I had issues, and I was still looking for my little niche in Grand Haven. A coworker of my husband suggested I come volunteer here. And I walked through the doors, didn't know anybody, only saw this blue building. And the rest is history.
I was valuable as a person, not in spite of the panic disorder and the anxiety and the depression, but I was valued as a whole person. And I get emotional talking about that because this place has really been an anchor in my life, and I've seen it. I've seen how it's impacted so many other people's lives in a truly positive way.
So I'm actually a suicide attempt survivor, and I attempted when I was 14. So it's something that's really hard for me to talk about a lot of the time. Since that experience, I've always been trying to find a place to feel like myself, a place to feel connected to others. And on that journey, I found Momentum Center.
The staff, excellent. I love the members. I myself am a member.
I like and I enjoy everything. I like all the activities they do. I like journey writing. They take us on outings.
I needed the help socially, and the staff said they were also members, so that made me feel safe and comfortable.
It's one thing to say, I want an inclusive community, but the way that they do it is they build real relationships between people.
I'm a member, I'm a volunteer, I'm a board member now, and I'm fully committed to their mission, which is to create a stigma-free community and to make sure everyone feels welcomed, accepted, and like there's a space for them to be who they are fully.
So what I wanted to do with the last part of our presentation was talk about mental illness and how we can all respond to the needs around us. Right now, as I said, 1 in 4 people will struggle with a significant mental illness. So if you are one of those people, there are steps that you can take. And I'm going to be really transparent right now. I mentioned my son who has schizophrenia. And then I briefly mentioned his older brother, Jackson. Jackson struggled with PTSD and depression and anxiety. And he also had a debilitating illness, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, that had affected his gastrointestinal system and left him in pretty constant pain. So less than a month ago, it'll be a month tomorrow, he gave up his battle with that disease and chose to end his life. So mental health has real repercussions that can literally be fatal. So what can we do? Again, if you're one of 4 people who are struggling with mental illness, don't be afraid and don't be ashamed. Recognize that you are not alone, that there are many people who do understand and who do care and that want to help in any way they can. Get help. You can't cure mental illness on your own. It isn't about willpower. It isn't about trying harder, and it isn't your fault. Find community at a place like Momentum Center or other places. Make sure that you find a community that'll accept you just as you are. And when you're ready, and when you have a support system in place, you may choose to become an advocate for others struggling with mental health. By telling your own story, you can help dispel the myths and the misunderstandings, but the first responsibility is to your own well-being. If you have a loved one who's struggling, and whether you know it or not, you do, there are also some steps you can take. First of all, don't take it personally. It really isn't about you. Your loved one isn't angry at you. They're not trying to hurt you. They're not trying to sabotage your life. Don't blame yourself. We understand very little about mental illness. We understand very little about the brain. And we just don't know what the cause of mental illness is in many cases. Blaming doesn't help anybody recover. Instead, focus on what we can do now to create an atmosphere of health and recovery. And get the support you need. There's so much to process and so much uncertainty when a loved one has a mental illness. So don't isolate yourself. Find a support system where you are safe talking about your struggles, your frustrations, and your needs. Something like the family support group is a really good place to connect and find a place to be vulnerable and receive the support and care of others. If somebody you know shares their story or their struggle with you, there are 2 things to keep in mind. One is don't ask, how could this have happened? Once again, that puts us into that blaming role. As human beings, we want to be able to blame someone or something so we can fix it, but mental health doesn't work that way. So try to discipline yourself to accept the past for the mystery that it is, so you can be present with your friend wherever they are today. And please don't tell us that whatever we're doing now that is working for our loved one isn't the right thing to do. It's fine to let us know that you've heard about new research or send us an article, but please try to respect and appreciate that nothing about mental illness is a fixed science. We've tried everything, and if something is working, we're just not going to mess with it. I mentioned it took 5.5 months to find the right medication for my son. He's stable. I will have well-meaning people tell me that he shouldn't be on medication. I know what happened to him when he was not on medication, and I'm not going to do that to him. And it's not helpful to suggest to me that I do that. I think we need to really honor and respect the steps that people are taking. We're doing the best we can. And instead listen and support and be willing to learn. And we can all work to end stigma. So whatever your connection or distance from mental illness, please make a conscious effort to act to end the stigma. Ignorance is a constant companion of stigma. So the more you can learn and be informed, the better. And then share that information with others. Just taking time to come to a conversation like this is a huge step in dismantling stigma and arming yourself with information and facts. Vote for and support politicians who will help end mental health disparity in our country. Because marginalization happens with mental illness, scant resources are usually not given to the things most more marginalized. Mental health has always been underfunded. And then I have a whole nother presentation that talks about the history of our approach to mental illness. We still largely treat it like a moral failing. We don't prioritize and give it the funding it needs. At one point, we were building hospitals that gave a lot of relief to people who had loved ones with mental illness. Those hospitals were never adequately funded. And so human rights abuses started taking place, which were rightfully challenged. But the result was that those hospitals almost all closed and that support's gone. We now have more people with mental illness in our prisons than we have psychiatric beds for people in this country. And that's a real problem. It's a real problem. Talk about your own mental health as part of your overall well-being. Whether you use meditation or music or medication, when you talk to other people about your health, include what you do for your mental health. Make that part of the regular conversation, an integral part of your well-being. Cultivate compassion. Listen to what others are trying to say and allow room in your world for their reality. I also like to talk about the reality of neurodiversity. We're all wired differently. We all process the world differently. It doesn't mean that people necessarily need to be fixed. They need to be understood and, again, have that place of community and compassion. So embrace neurodiversity. Recognize that it doesn't define the person. My son is not his diagnosis. And just to put it out there, one of the first things that happens when I talk about having a son with schizophrenia is people immediately assume that he must get violent. So I just want to mention that violence isn't even a symptom of schizophrenia. And people with schizophrenia and other mental health disorders are far more likely to be victims of violence than to commit violence themselves. I think that's an important counter narrative in a society where, again, when anything bad happens, we immediately jump to assumptions about the people who commit those acts. And it's not fair to the people who are living with those realities. So challenge those things. Politely educate and inform others when they say things that are untrue or hurtful about mental illness and the people who struggle with it. Be a voice for the voiceless. And I invite you to join our efforts. Oh, and look at this. I haven't even been advancing my slides. Just rambling on. Join the efforts at the Momentum Center. Donate, become a member, participate in our annual events, buy a ticket to the homecoming I'm going to be there. It's a great opportunity to dress up in your homecoming gear. If we all work together, we'll keep gaining momentum. So just to review these again, these are things you can do right now if you want to support our work. You can become a member. It's $1. If you have a problem with that, we have scholarships available. We never want cost to be a barrier. Participate in our community conversations. I mentioned the one that we just had on common values along political, the spectrum. We also are planning one on common values across cultures, and then we'll talk about different perspectives, common values. So the idea is, again, to move to that place where we can talk about the things we don't agree on, but we can do that respectfully and learn from each other in the process. Attend, I mentioned Homecoming with a Heart. Visit the VU Cafe when you're in Grand Haven. You will not be disappointed. Be a connector. If you could introduce me to, join a cultural immersion experience. So again, in August, we're going to China. In April, we'll be going back on the Civil Rights Road Trip. And there's always opportunities available. Let me know if you're interested in any of those. Be a connector. Introduce me to one person. Help me get in front of another group of people so I can share what we're doing, the impact that it's having, and invite more people to be part of that conversation. Become a donor or a sponsor, and be a volunteer. One of the big impacts for us with COVID was losing our volunteer base. A lot of people who were very active as volunteers before COVID, during that period of time, had life changes. And when the restrictions came up, they didn't return to volunteer. And we're not unique in that. This is a need across all the nonprofits these days. But we have lots of opportunities for people to be as involved as you want. We have people who come every single week, and we have people who come once. If you have a hobby or a skill that you'd like to just teach our members, that would be fabulous. If you're willing to just sit and be a listener, people need to be heard. And often that can be a challenge for my staff because they have work to do. So we need just volunteer listeners, people to go on outings. And then there's always the backroom stuff, stuffing envelopes and all the non-glamorous things that has to be done if you're gonna run an organization. So lots of opportunities. And in the end, one of the most important things you can do is be an advocate. Our whole healthcare system is broken, and mental health within the healthcare system is profoundly flawed. It can be almost impossible to access. My son would have never gotten the help that he needed if I hadn't been his advocate. There is no question in my mind that my youngest, Alex, would be in prison or dead if I'd not been an advocate for him. I already knew much of the system because of previous work, and I still struggled. Often people with mental illness have no advocates. The disease itself damages the relationships with the people who would most likely be there to speak for you. And the system can be impossible to navigate if you don't have an advocate. The very nature of the illness drives people away and severs the most important relationships many of us have in life. So people need us to speak up and to vote and to be part of change. So this is my son, Alex, today, and actually that's probably a year old because he's lost a bunch of weight. He's the one who grills the hot dogs and hamburgers at our movie and dinner event. That's his way of giving back to the community, and he takes great pride in being our grill master. That takes place the second Friday of every month, dinner at 5, movie at 6. You're all invited. And I recognize that I take a risk when I talk about Alex because it's not accepted, right? People question and they distance and they push back. But my son is taking an even bigger risk by allowing me to share his story. And I don't do that without his permission. I absolutely need his permission before I'll talk about his experience. And he's taking this risk that at the end, you'll leave feeling sorry for him. He doesn't need that. He doesn't need your pity or your sympathy. What he needs is for you to leave feeling empowered to dismantle stigma and to demand that mental illness be treated with the respect and the resources that it deserves. So I admire his courage, and I hope that we all can be so brave. And with that, I'd like to see if you have questions for me.
Just remember, please wait until the microphone.
I just want to say that coming from a long background of having been involved in juvenile courts, adoption agencies, a lot of social services organizations, that was as impressive as anything I've ever heard. That it sounds like you are operating from a point of spontaneity instead of bureaucracy and not a lot of paperwork to do. And I'm just really impressed.
Thank you. Thank you. We're very much an organic organization. We try something, and if it works, we keep doing it. And if it doesn't work, we learn and do it differently.
For your volunteers, what is your orientation program for them?
So there are a couple of, we have an application that you fill out, and then you do have to have training in recipient rights and in basic first aid CPR. And then we also offer, it's not mandatory, but we offer QPR training, and often we'll have mental health first aid training available. Jenna Vipond is my volunteer coordinator. And then I have 2 program coordinators. And so there's orientation, depending again on what you're going to do and how involved you're going to be. If you're coming in to teach a class, it's less than if you're going to be out with our members regularly. Yeah.
Do you run background checks on your volunteers?
We do. On our volunteers and on our staff. It doesn't mean that if you have something in your background, you're automatically excluded, but there are safety issues that we have to make sure of.
How are your 2 centers different or the same, Holland and Grand Haven?
So the programming is very similar. They both have calendars, and there's probably 4 to 6 distinct activities offered each day. So we're not a drop-in center. We're activity-based. So you can't just come and watch TV for 6 hours. And we're also not, you don't have to participate in a particular program. Like everybody does this at 3 o'clock and everybody does this at 4. You get to opt in and opt out of anything that you want. And so there's a lot of collaboration and between the centers on what they're offering. And we also bring people from one place to the other so that there's additional kind of integration and opportunities to meet other people. So we work hard to not have them be very different. I think just because we have 2 different people as program coordinators, there's probably a little different feel just with human interaction. But we are really working to create more. Right now we're working on putting together the policies and procedures to be able to have more momentum centers. So we want to replicate this. We want it in additional communities, additional counties. And so we're trying to standardize those expectations so that they don't look wildly different.
Where is the Holland Center located, and the ice cream store? Is that a fundraiser or?
So the Holland location is currently at 345 West 14th Street, which is the former Community Action House. And the sad news is they're selling that property. So we are actively looking for a place to move. And you probably haven't heard lately about the ice cream center because we're in this whole strange transition mode, trying to figure out where we are. And there's less incentive to keep saying, oh, come here, come here, come here, because we're not going to be there much longer. So that's the tenuousness right now in Holland. But the Momentum Center is part of that, and it's $1 a scoop for Country Fresh ice cream. So it's not a fundraiser. It's definitely about the public integration piece. And the hours right now are limited to volunteer hours, volunteers working in the ice cream. So if you have any knowledge or leads for other places we can go in Holland, make sure to let me know, because we're actively pursuing that, and we'll need to be out the early part of 2025.
I love going to movies. How would we find out which movies and when are being shown at your facilities?
If you sign up for the newsletter, you will get all of our activities. Our newsletter goes out twice a month. We send one out about the first of the month and one midway through. One is gaining momentum, and in that one, I always have a little article and a TED Talk, and there's a little more content. The other one is strictly, here's all the upcoming events. Also, we're on Facebook. You can like us on Facebook. Those are probably the two main ways to know what's going on. I can tell you that this Friday, this is an exception. This Friday, we're doing dinner and not a movie because we're finishing construction on our new location in Grand Haven. It's supposed to be done by the end of September, but we temporarily don't have our community room to show the movie in. So we're still going to treat people to dinner. And then we're going to show Inside Out 2 in October. And the plan is The Boy and the Heron in November.
So first, I just wanted to comment that I really admire your grace in the face of some of the contentious leadership at the county level in the last year and a half. So appreciate everything that you're doing to move this topic forward. But my question is, what is the status of your funding through community mental health through the millage? Because I know there have been some issues with the Community Mental Health Board.
Yeah, it's been a trying 18 months. And so what has happened is and this is why I want to be so clear about how we're spending millage money, because we have been criticized for some of our events that are about social determinants, right? Particularly addressing racism and particularly having LGBTQ support groups and the like. So the county commissioners don't directly impact the mental health funding, but they appoint the people to the CMH board. And so the board is primarily made up of appointees from that perspective. And so there was originally a move to take away the funding. It was challenged that, how can you can't do that if there's not a rationale for that. And so what happened is all the social rec programs got pulled for further investigation. So we've supplied copious amounts of information. And then what they decided to do was complete the funding for the year, which ends the end of September, and then to issue new RFPs. So we have to apply all over again. And so we have applied all over again, and we have been informed that there is an intent to award our grant request. It's less than we've been receiving. They put a cap on it that's lower than what we've been receiving, but it will be really, really good if we get it. It still needs to go to the CMH board for approval. So the board meeting is September 30th. And I'm more hopeful than I was a while ago, but I'm not counting on it. It's significant. It's 43% of our budget. So it's significant, but we're not going anywhere. And if we don't get that funding, it doesn't mean the needs are gone. We're still going to be here serving people as best we can.
What's the hardest part of doing this? Like, is it hard to get members to make them comfortable enough to come? Do they find you or do you find them?
It's not difficult to get members. We get a lot of referrals, again, from therapists, from CMH, from Mosaic, a lot of word of mouth referrals. We get a lot of people from the school district. Oh, and I didn't mention that. One of the areas of focus is if you're a young person with a disability, you can stay in school until you're 26, but then all those supports end. And so we work really hard with the intermediate school district to make sure people already have community so that when they age out of school, they continue to have community around them. We don't go down to the festival and put up a booth and say it's only $1 to be a member. Let's get 800 members today, right? We don't do that. Where you have to come in, you have to fill out the application. We're interested in participation. So we track member activity. And if we haven't seen you in a month, we're actively calling to try to figure out what's going on. Is there a problem we can help with? Or maybe you're just back to work, or things are going really well. But each month, there's only a handful of people that we don't know what's going on with. Our contact rates usually about 96%. Probably the hardest thing in Holland has been breaking into the donor world. Operationally, programmatically, we're going great guns. New members all of the time. But we've had a hard time breaking into the donor world in Holland. And I think part of it is because we're not faith-based. We're not anti-faith. All faiths are welcome. I know it was mentioned I'm an ordained interfaith minister, but I think that's been maybe a little bit of a barrier for us. And then just the challenge of the lack of volunteers since COVID.
In working with those who have mental health issues, how do you handle those who also have addictions, whether it be alcohol or whatever?
Often there's dual diagnosis, right? So a lot of people who end up using substance abuse are often using that for untreated, often undiagnosed mental health issues. So a lot of it would be difficult to make people be in one category. There's just so much co-occurring. Our focus is obviously on recovery. So we have smart recovery. I hope it goes without saying that we don't allow drug use on our site. Anything like that would be means for being, dismissed from the program. So we encourage people in their sobriety. We have a lot of people who've done community service with us. And many times those people have stayed when their community service ends as volunteers, sometimes becoming members, sometimes being member volunteers. That's one of the kind of on-ramps to our work. The other on-ramp is the VU Cafe momentum. We have found that 30% of our members have come through that soft entry. It's a way to come in and test the waters and make sure it's welcoming before raising your hand to say, I'd like to join. Did that answer your question? Yes.
This is from the chat room. Thank you for your center and all you do. My question is whether you've seen needs in younger kids. Have you given any thought to programs for younger kids?
Absolutely. There are needs for younger kids. When we first started, we started with adults only. And then we were asked to address high schoolers. So we added high schoolers. And then there were needs beyond before high school. And then we moved down to 11. Absolutely, the needs are there. And if we can identify funding streams, we will create those programs. There's many unmet needs. And again, I think we really need to get creative about how we engage as ordinary human beings in the mental health space. And I think we need to create more peer support opportunities. And we're in a community that recognizes peer supports, but often we'll say you need to be a peer support person if you have an addiction or if you have a mental illness. I think we need to start looking at peers as just being in the same age group or in the same kind of identity cluster, and starting to really equip people with some basic mental health interventions, so that, again, you know, my son who is 32 could be in a young adult group, that you don't have to identify with mental illness to be in a place of support and community. And it's made up of both the peer mentors and then people in need, and you don't necessarily know who's who, right? I think we need to get creative about those community approaches, because again, we have a lack of resources, period. I mean, we can wish and hope for more psychiatrists to move into town, but like wishing and hoping don't usually work out really well. So I think it's and I'm a part of the CHIP program now, the Community Health Improvement Plan, that is looking at the community health needs assessment data, which shows mental health is the #1 concern in our county, and saying, how are we going to approach this? I think one of the things that's going to come out of that is a mental wellness task force that can start looking across all of our organizations for those kind of creative approaches, because just asking for more of what we've got is not going to work. Yeah.
Another online question. What goalposts are you delighted to have reached?
So I think I mentioned we got published. I mean, our research being published in a peer-reviewed journal is pretty astounding. I mentioned that we're finishing our construction project in Grand Haven. We just moved into our offices yesterday, so that's super exciting. And I have not made a public announcement, so I guess now it's going to be public. So I need to get the press release out, give me a chance. But we met our capital campaign goal, which in Grand Haven, we had a goal of $2 million, and we raised that in about a year and a half. And that's super exciting, because what that does is it means we're not paying a bunch of money in rent, that we have an asset that we're investing in the community. And that helps assure that financial stability that we need, particularly if millage funding or other funding goes away. So I would say those are really happy times.
So a very specific question. You have mentioned on at least a couple of occasions in your remarks that one of your big needs is volunteers. Do you have specific activities or roles that you would deem most pressing where you need more volunteer help?
We have volunteer job descriptions. And I know, like, from my perspective, I need somebody to help with social media. But if you talk to Jenna, she will probably say we need someone in Holland helping with just programming there. I have one full-time program coordinator in Holland, and that's my only Holland staff. And so really, and we have some volunteers helping, but that's, I would say, programmatically, getting people to help in Holland would be top priority. And then beyond that would be kind of the social media, getting the advertising, right? So people know that we need that.
Barbara, thank you so much for not only being present, informing us, but opening your heart. And that's much appreciated. Thank you. And it's a great day when you get out of class early. At least it was for me here at Hope College 50 years ago. So
thank you. I do have copies of our annual report here with more data and our contact information if you'd like to grab one of those. Thank you.